hear straight from some of the best practitioners and leaders in wellness on how to take control of your family's physical, spiritual, and mental health, because we are all designed to flourish. And as a reminder, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the Flourish podcast should be taken as medical advice. For your own specific medical advice, please always consult with your own healthcare providers. Now, today, I am so excited to welcome Michelle Rowton, nurse practitioner and owner and founder of the Wonderfully Made Wellness Sanctuary in McKinney, Texas. So, Michelle, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, dear. I have been wanting to have you on for a long, long time, so I'm excited that we are finally doing this. Tell us a little bit about your background and I guess first just how you got started into nursing.
Oh gosh. I actually wanted to be a nurse in the neonatal ICU my whole childhood. I'm sure I went through the whole, I want to be a vet or a marine biologist kind of thing, like every kid does, but very quickly I decided I was going to be a nurse. And I was going to work in the neonatal intensive care unit because I love babies. And I even went so far as to say, I'm going to be one of those people that flies around in helicopters and picks up sick babies and brings them back in. And I'm going to be a nurse practitioner. And so I did all of those things. Little did I did all of that. Little did I know I was going to get really, really sick in college and go to 9 or 10 doctors that couldn't help me. And ended up going to internal medicine doctor turned homeopathist and some other alternative providers to get better, and went, wow, there's this whole world out there. So the whole time I was working in the hospital for, 14 years maybe. I was also studying the other side, as I call it. So I am a very interesting combo. It's hard to find somebody else with a combo like mine. But I have been specializing in babies for 22 years now.
That's a good long while.
Yeah.
So obviously you are very holistically minded. Your practice is a very holistic practice, and we're going to dig in on what exactly that means. But did you grow up in was your family super hippy dippy? Were you into any of this stuff as a kid, or was this just because you got sick and there weren't good answers?
No, I mean, diet was important in my house. And of course there were some things that we thought were correct that were not correct back then. But no, my mom is also a nurse. She was a hospital administrator. She is very natural and, lives in a non-toxic house with a perfect diet and all the things now. But between myself being very sick and then one of my mom's sisters having multiple chemical sensitivities way back in the day before we had a name for it and people really knew what to do for those people, was those two things that really drove me to study the more holistic treatments.
Okay. So what did that journey look like? Clearly the way that you practice now is very different than flying in helicopters to bring babies to the hospital. So what were you got sick, were interested in these more holistic practices. Then how did you get from there to being a functional medicine practitioner?
So I went to school to become a nurse practitioner. And during that time, I was really wanting to have babies and could not get pregnant. So I really went even deeper on healing myself from all of my childhood illnesses and exposure to medications. I was one of those chronic ear infection, probably was on over 100 rounds of antibiotics as a kid type people, diagnosed with 3 autoimmune diseases by the age of 29. So I really finally just said, well, I'm going to have to help myself, right? So I just started studying everything. And then when I would be on call for 24 hours in a hospital that was smaller, where there wasn't a lot going on, the other nurse practitioners were reading or watching movies or sleeping, and I was studying the stuff that I really wanted to know about. And then I went part-time in the hospital and I ran a functional medicine program for Dr. Laura, pre-court for adults. So I was the director of that. And so I learned a lot working there for a year. And then I kind of was stolen by a more holistic pediatrician and came completely out of the hospital then. So that was kind of my journey. It really started with healing myself. And then I started learning as much as I could and helping other people. And I ended up at opening Wonderfully Made.
Awesome. And so you opened Wonderfully Made, I think pretty close to when I opened Flourish. Tell me when did you open? What motivated you to finally make the leap?
So there were a few things. I did not want to work in a black hole. I don't know if you ever had to do that, but like hospitals, you're stuck in a black hole. The pediatrician office that I was in, there were no windows in the back.
Oh, gosh.
And yeah, and there were, even though it was a more holistic pediatrician, I was like, there are some things going on here that I don't want to be a part of. And also, I don't like it that I'm trying to help these really complex kids, but it's on insurance. And so I get like 7 to 15 minutes. If I got 30 minutes with someone, I usually was just then running behind, but I needed to do what I needed to do. And so when I had Jason, my second child, I decided not to go back to work. And I said, when I go back to work, I'm going to open my own business. There is going to be lots of windows, which you can see behind me. I'm in a corner office. There's going to be a lot of windows, and we're just going to really narrow down and focus on what group it is we're helping and what's going on in the office and what's not going on in the office. And my appointments are going to be either 30 minutes long or 60 minutes long. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
And you started kind of right in the height of all the fun COVID stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was wanting to open March or April of 2020. I was going to buy a house to work out of. And then we went into lockdown, and John and I, my husband and I, thought, maybe we shouldn't buy something right now. This is really weird. And so everything just went on long enough. I finally said, well, people need us now more than ever. People are not getting good care. They're not being seen in person. They're for sure not getting any sort of like holistic options to care for their children. And so it was about September 2020 that we just opened, and I'm like, okay, well, we're just going to do it. It's now or never. So
love it. Love it. Mm-hmm. And you guys are in downtown McKinney, mm-hmm. Which is, if anybody listening has never been to downtown McKinney, it's adorable. It's such a great mm-hmm. downtown area. And you've got an awesome spot in this really cool older building. So mm-hmm. I love it. I love the location, and it does. And it has a ton of windows.
It does. And like, I had a few people, I had one from like west of Fort Worth come in this week, one from East Texas, one from Oklahoma, and all 3 times their first appointments, the moms were like, I have never been here. This is cute. I'm like, yeah, take the older kids around. They have fairy doors that you can go find, like little tiny doors that they have at some of the businesses. The kids love that. I mean, it's a really fun place.
I love it. Love it. Love it. So you touched on, I think definitely your practice is different than a traditional pediatric office, different than a more holistic pediatric office, because you're not using insurance. Your appointments are longer, obviously. What would you say are like the top 3 to 5 things that make Wonderfully Made different than anybody else?
We definitely fully believe in parental choice here, and that the parent is working with us. And if somebody is not a good fit here, I will refer them to another office or 2 or 3 that will fit them better. So I'm like, I'm here for you no matter what, but if this isn't a good fit, I definitely will send you on. we have, I have like a quantum infrared laser that I use for ears or for coughs, and I do muscle testing. There's not another like holistic pediatric office where someone is using those kind of alternative modalities, which can be really helpful. Um, I am very specialized in infants and toddlers. Like I, of course, have all of my crunchy moms that come through, and they don't come in all the time. They come in as needed. So I'm not dragging through. I say it as we don't make money off of cattle driving. So I don't need you to come in once every 2 months as long as everything is fine. But at the same time, I can take very complex infants that are like, I mean, I have kids with feeding tubes and on oxygen and ventilators and seizure disorders and very, very obscure genetic disorders. Like I have, like, it's kind of a dichotomy throughout the day. And it looks like a house. So we don't do anything with needles in here. There is no lab drawing and nobody is being held down. The kids come in, there's toys, we're barefoot, so that we're not bringing toxins and stuff into the office and across the baby mats. We have baby mats on the floors in the offices so the babies can actually play on the floor so we can observe them and their motor skills instead of just asking the parents questions, which I know I catch a lot more, like maybe variances or things that need to be tweaked that other people aren't gonna catch. So it is a very different office. And it is funny because sometimes a toddler, once I get out my stethoscope, if they've been in a different office before, they kind of go, they're like, I thought I was on a play date. Like, why do you have one of those ear thingies and a stethoscope, So it looks like a house. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Since newborns are definitely the under two world is definitely your specialty. So I want to dig in and really focus on that today. I love that you get to actually observe kiddos doing what kiddos do. I will say I'm spewing things all over my office all day long. And I have plenty of moms who, if you've got a toddler that's in the crawling ages, it's hard to keep a toddler to themselves. But I cringe a little bit when I see them on the floor because I know that we have it's a dental office and there are biofilms and things that spray. So I love that you have an office where it's possible. I cannot imagine letting my child crawl on the floor of a pediatrician's office. I would be horrified.
I occasionally still get a mom that's like, no, I'm not going to put the kid down. I'm like, okay, but I still work with them up on the changing table.
Yeah.
Like on the big on the big changing table pad or whatever. But for the most part, I'm like, everybody take your shoes off and like, don't walk on the mats. Even with your socks on, don't walk on the mats. Like those are for the babies. So
love it. Okay. So if you had to distill it down to new moms or first time moms, what would you say are like 1 to 3 of the most important things for a new mom to know?
You know what I've been talking about the last couple of months? Not everybody breastfeeds, but for the breastfeeding moms, like, why are they not planning to spend money and time with a lactation consultant? It kind of kills me a little bit. Like, we have the fancy pictures and the fancy pump, and we have the doula, and we have all of the things, and then they don't want to see lactation. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, so I need you to see lactation. And they're like, me? Like, okay, let me tell you a story, okay? I've been specializing in infants for 22 years. I have breastfed two of my, sorry, I have something on me. I breastfed, so I have 3 kids. I'm breastfeeding my 3rd kid, okay? I breastfed the first one for 3 years and 9 months. I breastfed the second one for 3 years and 9 months. That was their choice. I don't know why it ended at the same time. Of course, by then they're nursing like once a day. But just to say, like, that's how long it lasted. And I nursed 2 of them at the same time for over a year. So I was tandem nursing. Okay. I just had my 3rd baby. She's about to turn 1. And I still had lactation come to see me twice. Like, I'm not special. I wasn't special. My kids were tongue and lip tied. My first baby was a terrible eater. The second one was way, way, way better, but we still spot checked once with him to make sure and did some adjustments that were really helpful. Like, for the new moms, I'm like, yes, you need lactation, and yes, you have to pay them money, and you need to use them. You know what I'm saying?
But
That's
what
like,
if,
for me, the new moms right now, I'm like, you guys, like, your life would just be so much easier and you'd be calmer.
God, seriously,
Like,
I
you
wish
would,
I would have
yes.
known. Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
So what
yeah.
if, I know I've had moms say to me, well, oh, somebody visited me in the hospital that was a lactation consultant. Is
Not
that
the
the
same.
same?
Absolutely not the same. They are not the same echelon. Now, my 2 favorite lactation consultants worked in the hospital at some point, and they were like really good when they were in the hospital, but there's only so much they can do in the hospital in that fresh postpartum time when they're supposed to be running around to all the different rooms. A lot of the hospital lactation people, quite frankly, are not very good at their job. And then when you get home, you're at home. You're not in a hospital bed. You're in a couch, or you're in your own bed, or now we're in a different stage, right? Like, the first,
Mhm.
you, like, a lot of these moms are getting help when the baby is sleepy. They get discharged at 24 hours. After that, nighttime comes, the brainstem kicks on in the baby and goes, I should definitely eat all the time around the clock so the milk comes in and I don't die. And the moms, and they're like, rah! Now they're like boxing at the boobs and they're really stressed out. It's like, no, that little bit of help you had in the hospital bed when everyone's still recovering from delivery and we haven't had that like switch flip, like, here I come, like, I'm bringing the milk in because I need to eat. That is not helpful.
Yeah.
It's just not.
No, I totally agree. I would have loved for someone to have shared that with me when I
Right.
was a new mom.
Yes. The amount of money I spent on lactation with Julia, I mean, she was a very dysfunctional eater, very
Yeah.
dysfunctional. Victoria, the last one, Kelsey came in and she's like, what is she doing? And I'm like, she's like sucking backwards and in a circle. This is not, I have no idea what she's doing. She's like, okay, but we got her, between my husband doing the body work and having lactation coming twice that really knew what she was doing, and you released her ties within a couple of weeks, like, we were flipped around.
Yeah.
She would have been a disaster for a new mother, and she would have, like, it would have been a breastfeeding failure without lactation.
Oh yeah, and I don't
Mhm.
think, if I'm remembering right, I don't think her tie was so visibly obvious. So I think a lot of
She would
new
have been
moms,
missed. Yes,
yeah,
she
it
would have
would have
been
been.
missed. She had a very bad, I mean, she was tied like from posterior all the way to anterior, but it was not, it's not obvious to someone who's not specially trained.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm specially trained in tongue and lip ties is because of Julia. I mean, I remember the pediatrician I was working for at the time, she had the baby out in front of her. They hold the babies out in front of them and they're like looking at the mouth. And she's
Mm-hmm.
going, really? You have a laser scheduled for her? Her mouth doesn't look that bad, but she's just looking at it like just in front of her. She's not doing an exam. And I said, well, my nipples say otherwise. Like, they were already destroyed. So we get to the dentist, who is a preferred provider, and she's like, this is one of the worst mouths I've ever seen. And that's when my brain went, and Julia's going to be 9 this year. That's when my brain went, oh my God, you people have no idea what you're talking about, which means I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I do not like that. I don't
Yeah.
like that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I always say God tortures me for a reason. Maybe I should come up with a different phrase. But really, I mean, everything that these moms are going through, I've been through all of it. Like when I'm
Your
asking
mess
you,
becomes your message.
yes, I've had to do all of it myself. I know all the extra things I know because I felt like I didn't have very good help. I feel like a lot of us are like that. Um,
Yep.
and so it's just important. When I went to the dental conference for pediatric, ties, I was all dentists and me, like the nurse practitioner sitting in there. There was a nurse practitioner presenting because she owns breastfeeding clinics in Arizona and she does lasers herself.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I was the only one. And I remember them going, how do we get the pediatricians to pay attention to this? Because they're not. And I said, one of the most profound things for me when I came back to work after Julia, and I was concerned that somebody was going to come in to see me in the same situation I had been in, and that I wasn't going to I wasn't going to catch it, or was going to miss it, or wasn't going to adequately support them. I went back to the preferred dentist and said, like, can I come in so that you can teach me what to look for? And she was very smart. She goes, I don't need to teach you that. I need to teach you what the signs and symptoms are because it's not your job to do that level of an exam and class the ties and all of the things, right? I do that now in my office just because I know how to do it and I'm trained in it. But that wasn't my job. My job was to listen for the signs and symptoms and then refer to the appropriate person. And all the dentists were like, oh, it's like, so if you can get to the pediatricians about that, like, here's a symptom checklist. Like if the baby is doing this or mom is saying this or their nipples doing it, whatever it is, send them to someone that knows what they're talking about, right? And so that was just very important to me that those moms were listened to. It is my favorite thing when like a doctor will tell me, oh, that this tie thing, it's a fad. It's a fad. And I go, really? So then why did the pediatrician and newborn nursery release my twin brother in 1980? 1980, he was
Wow.
released. I was not released because I was in NICU. I just had mine released 4 years ago.
Hmm.
And they stammer and they stutter. I'm like, no, sir, let's not gaslight the moms. This is a real thing.
So why do you think it is controversial? Why do you think people call it a fad? Because it seems to be, I don't even know that very many in dentistry call it a fad. It seems to be mostly
Medicine.
pediatricians.
Yeah.
Why do
And
you
like
think that is?
or just any doctor of any MD of any, it could be the ER. I mean, I've had an ER
Yeah.
doctor that I was at the same dinner I was at say that to me, and I said that to him and he was like, huh. I was like, yeah, you're just listening to like BS and regurgitating it back out, which is embarrassing. Don't do that. And he was like, I was like, anyways, have a nice night, and like walked off. But I think that it all goes back to, pretty much everyone was breastfed, a very high percentage, because we didn't have formulas
Right.
decades ago in the country. Then the formulas were invented. We came up with growth charts. We had I call it the old white dudes. We had the old white dudes in charge of the mothers and the birthing and the breastfeeding, and your baby's not gaining enough weight, and really steered everyone far away from breastfeeding, right? And so during that time period, nobody was helping anyone breastfeed that wanted to breastfeed and was having a hard time. Formula is amazing. Your baby's not gaining weight, so just use the formula. And then I think the whole thing just disappeared, right?
Mm.
So then we had moms having babies who were not breastfed, so their mothers could not help them, their aunts could not help them, their friends could not help them, and we just got really far away from it. I've seen pictures of cave drawings where you can tell they're drawing about releasing tongue ties.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I wish I had that saved somewhere, but I have seen them before. Like you can find them, people going over the history of tongue ties,
Yeah.
where they go over that. But I call it the old white dude phenomenon. The babies only need to eat every 4 hours. Don't feed them more often than that.
Yeah.
Formula's fine. Babies don't grow right on breast milk. Like all of those things.
I
It
can
just all
remember.
just all went away. And so now that we're driving it back, the the average breastfeeding length in the world is age 4 to 5. If you take the United States out, okay? The United States, the average is hitting about 6 months now, which is better than it used to.
Better.
Yeah. So we
Wow.
definitely have more mothers breastfeeding. We have a lot more moms driven to breastfeed. And then it's like, are you getting the correct help? I mean, I know I've sent kids to your office where they're older infants and now we're having like motor skill issues. They're super tight or they just can't figure out how to eat solids or whatever it is. And moms had these concerns, these ongoing concerns about the babies, and they've been to 5 pediatricians. Finally, they land in my office and I'm like, this is like a really severe tongue tie. This is bad. Like this baby cannot move his tongue at all, right?
Yeah.
And then mom had tried to breastfeed. It didn't work. She didn't have enough milk. It hurt, all of the things. And like, I can't tell you how many times a mom has said to me, I'm like, okay, let me show you this mouth. And I'm like at the head, showing them all of the things. And they go, like, they get real quiet and they're like, so my baby is tied, like very significantly so. And that explains why you had this when you were breastfeeding and why the baby did okay. But then when the baby turned 3 or 4 months, they dropped off the growth curve because at the beginning, it's all hormone driven. And then after your prolactin level comes down and resets, it's all supply and demand. So if your baby's eliciting that letdown and taking the free ride at the boob as it just kind of funnels into their mouth and they're not actually good at drawing that milk out, then when it comes down to now we're all to supply and demand, mom's supply goes down and she thinks there's something wrong with her, right? And there's not anything wrong with her. It's just she didn't get the help that she needed. And so then they will say, I think I'm going to cry now. And I say, it's fine. You can cry. Everybody does. And then they just start crying because they've been through it, you know? And I hate that. It's just ridiculous. We don't need that for moms.
So if a provider has told a mom that baby's fine, the tongue doesn't look that bad, or they don't have a tongue tie, they don't believe a tongue tie. If another practitioner has said, nope, everything's fine, what would be some signs where you think they should get another opinion?
I know you know the answer to this as well. Mom is still having pain at the nipples. Her nipples are weird shapes when the baby unlatches, like the nipple's very long, or it looks like a lipstick, or there's a crease down the edge, or their nipples are blanching after. That hurts really bad, by the way. Thank you, Julia James. Baby is at the breast for a very long time and doesn't ever seem to be able to get off the breast. You know, once that baby's like 6 to 8 weeks, like they should be able to get some milk and then at least give you an hour and a half or 2 hours for a break, you know? Yeah. Or if every time you put them to the breast, they just fall asleep. That's another big sign. Or if they are spitting and sputtering and choking at the breast, mom's getting a lot of clogs in the breast because the baby is not removing milk very well. What am I missing?
Reflux,
for sure. Reflux.
Yeah.
Like a baby that's very spitting up and screaming and all of those things. I tell moms, like, if you go to nurse the baby and the baby is nursing and then the baby pulls off and screams and goes back to the breast and pulls off and screams and goes back to the breast, there is a high chance that the baby doesn't like something you're eating once those proteins hit the stomach. But if we're eating and the letdown comes and they're like, you know, they're pulling off and they're like sputtering because they're like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this flow. Or they're done and they're screaming and they're just spitting and spitting and spitting. There definitely could be ties there.
Yeah, agree. So we've answered a couple of these already, but so aside from tongue tie and not getting lactation support, are there any other big challenges that you see for moms that are breastfeeding?
You know, I think a big challenge is that sometimes the diet isn't very good and the baby is not appreciating what mom's eating. So take a baby that doesn't eat very well and or has a hard time eating, like you're trying to figure out the breastfeeding thing, and on top of that, they're screaming at you constantly. Like nobody
Yeah.
can function with a baby screaming at you 18 hours a day. And no, it's not normal. And no, I don't care if you call it colic or not, or if the pediatrician labeled it as whatever. It doesn't matter. Like babies should not scream at you all the time. They shouldn't. Like, are they maybe going to have like a witching hour in the evening where they're extra tired and you kind of have to work a little extra hard to keep them happy? Yes, of course. And like, but for the most part, if they're fed and they're changed and they're burped and they're being loved on, like we shouldn't be screaming for 2.5 hours, right? Like maybe you might have 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes at the most, but then they're calm, right? And so the biggest thing that I've been seeing recently is that there are some extremely unhappy babies, which is heartbreaking. And the moms are crying and they're destroyed. The dads, I had a dad sobbing in the office, like the baby just will not stop crying and nobody is helping them, you know? And again, like they could be tied, you know, and they could be refluxing. That's painful. Um, that the second thing that I see is that they have a headache. Most people can't pick up on that. So I'm like looking at them and the way they're like furrowing their brow, and they're like literally can't even open their eyes at me. And they're like, ugh, I'm like, this baby has a headache, or I can just see like restrictions in their head, like take them to the chiropractor minimum. But then we have to consider what you're eating, you know? And so that's the big thing is these grumpy babies. I had a mom come in and the baby had been screaming for 18 hours a day for 3 months and had been multiple different places. 3 months. Dad was bawling, like the whole thing. And I'm like, this baby has a headache. This baby may not like this formula as well. I can't really tell because the headache is so bad. So we're going to fix this first. You just you changed formula 5 times and you just changed it 3 days ago. So I'm like a little, you know, it's hard on them to just keep jumping. And so I texted John, my husband, at Kikino, and Megan at Kikino and their admin. I was like, this is an emergency. I need this baby in ASAP. So definitely everybody agreed the baby had a headache. Baby slept, was happy for 7 hours after the appointment. The parents were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Started up again with the crying. And I said, okay, we're going to go to HIP-HA, which is the hypoallergenic European formula. I asked around, posted in some moms group. I have an emergency. I need HIP-HA. And a mom drove it over to this mom and dropped it off to her. And so from the time the baby came in to the baby stopping screaming was 36 hours. I wish I was that mad. I mean, the baby's smiling and like totally had 3 months of 18 hours a day of screaming. I wish I was that magic all the time. And you know what? Like I tell the breastfeeding moms, they're like, oh, maybe I should just feed formula. I'm like, you don't want to be on the formula train because these people are ordering very expensive formula from Europe. And if their shipment gets stopped now, what are they going to do? Like that's also that's a stressful situation too. So, you know, be careful about the diet. The babies don't like dairy. They really don't like dairy. They just don't like dairy proteins. Definitely don't drink the dairy. Don't pour the dairy on your cereal. Don't eat ice cream that's dairy. That's liquid. It's just frozen. Don't pour it in your coffee. You know, be careful about that. And I think I've started asking moms, there is a food that I took away from you that you would have like an emotional response about. What food would that be? And almost always they'll say dairy or they'll say their sourdough bread or like whatever it is, but that's usually what the baby doesn't like. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jason, you know, as I said, Jason was a screaming baby and we at least knew what to do. I mean, day life 5, you're like, oh, he's refluxing. He's not happy. And John's like, it's the eggs. You eat eggs every day. I'm like, every day I have a sieta tortilla with eggs and salsa.
Yeah.
He's like, I know it's the egg. So like we immediately did that, but it was the bell peppers. So like literally he said, you can take your eggs and your salsa and stand down for the next year because I'm not doing it. Usually they don't make you last a year, but you just never know. And so
Right.
let's not walk around and pretend that we can eat McDonald's or just scoop peanut butter in the mouth constantly and like eat cheese and drink dairy, and that your baby is screaming and it somehow doesn't have anything to do with what you're taking in, which is
Right.
what the traditional pediatricians believe. They believe that it doesn't matter. So I think the
Mhm.
second thing would be that I have some very, very unhappy babies, and the moms are not getting good help on unraveling that so that we can have a happy baby.
If they've eliminated the big stuff, if they've eliminated dairy and gluten and things that would seem obvious, then what do you have them do?
So at that point, I'm usually asking a lot of questions about if they've had the body work too. Like some of them, they don't want to do the body work. And I'm like, listen, like you need to do body work on this baby. But if we've taken dairy out and gluten out, I started asking a lot of questions. Tell me what you are eating. Right. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I have the opposite. I have moms, I'm like, you can't just eat celery and ice all day. Like you can't eat four foods. Like you have to have a variety in your diet. But I do start asking, like, is there something you're eating a lot of? Like sometimes I'll figure out that mom really, she's busy. And so she's just eating scoops of peanut butter all day to try to get her through. Babies tend not like that. Sometimes it is the bell peppers or tomatoes that the baby doesn't like. So I just start to ask questions. I'm like, at this point, I do basic muscle testing in the office, or I'll send to someone that does like Dr. Laura that does really in depth muscle testing, or maybe the
Mhm.
baby needs some NATE treatments and AET, acupuncture, acupressure treatments to kind of reset some stuff. That can make a big difference too. So,
Mhm.
hmm
So when you talk about peanuts and moms eating peanut butter and knowing that there are so many more peanut allergies, do you know a best way forward with what we know now? Should moms have a little bit of peanut butter?
that is a
Should
loaded question.
I know,
Very
right?
loaded.
It
Okay.
wasn't even on my list. I just thought of it.
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. So the new thing, we pretend like it's 1980 in my office, by the way. Like we have little paleo babies for the first year, like veggies, fruits, meats, beans, lentils.
Mhm.
We do
Mhm.
the high allergen foods closer to a year. We're trying things every
Okay.
3 to 4 days. Like I just stick with the very old school, and knock on wood, there is like very low drama in my office usually. The new thing is that you should introduce the high allergen foods as soon as possible to decrease the chance of having like an anaphylactic reaction to a food. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, years ago when they came up with this, I was working with a different pediatrician, and we're looking at each other and looking at each other and going, that's not what we're seeing in our office. So I went out and I found the study that this was based off of. Okay. It was probably one of the worst studies I've ever read in my life. So what they did was they took a group of children, and all of them had eczema or asthma of like moderate to severe.
Mhm.
Okay. And they gave all of these kids high allergen foods sooner in life, like 4 months, 6 months, um, and compared them to the general public. Okay. And said, well, this group that had these foods sooner have less anaphylaxis than the general public rates. Okay, but this is the problem. They didn't use healthy kids. Okay, so usually if a baby's body or child's body is going to choose to tell you, I don't like something, they're either going to choose the chronic route or they're going to choose the acute route. Sometimes you have some that do both. Don't get me wrong. There are severe eczema kids out there that also have anaphylaxis. So don't come at me that I don't know what I'm talking about. But for the most part, they'll pick. So they took an entire group of kids that had already picked the chronic route. And they're flared up. They're on inhaled steroids, oral steroids, topical steroids. Okay, for all of their stuff, and fed them this and said, oh, they had less anaphylaxis, so now we should give these to everyone. I'm sorry, that is a horrible study model. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. To the point that I'm like, was this done on purpose so that we could keep the chaos going? I don't really understand. But I have kids coming into my office who are going to, and it's fine. I have kids that come from traditional offices. They're in the middle of something that nobody can help them get out of. And it might be a baby that can't breastfeed. And I help them with that. And they go back to their other office to do their traditional things. That is fine. That's their choice. But I have them come in, and now I have a 4-month-old with head to toe eczema because they started feeding the baby rice cereal at 4 months because PD said, which we should not be doing. Even the American Academy of Pediatrics says that is tied to type 2 diabetes and obesity, and they can't break grains down at that age, and we shouldn't be doing that. Now they're having them mix peanut butter powder into it. I don't know about you, but I find it rude to trick people into eating things. I don't care if you're 0 days old or 100 days old. That's rude. We don't trick people into eating things that they don't know what they're eating. Okay? Like, it just on an ethical level, I don't agree with that. Okay? Now we're covered in head to toe eczema after the second feeding of the peanut butter powder.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, we can run around and like try to say that we don't know what caused this, but like A happened and then B happened. And so I'm just going to go with this is what caused it. And so I'm going to move from here and we're going to hopefully clear this up. But I always tell people, if you're going to pretend or ignore the pattern of what caused what and how we went down the line and pretend that that's not it, it's going to take you a long time to reverse that if you're just going to ignore the obvious, right? So yes, that is a loaded question.
I love it.
I'm sure people would love to have my butt for having that opinion, but I mean, I just don't. I don't have the allergies in my office. My statistics are nothing like what's going on in the other offices. Do I still have, like, I had a kid last year. It's anaphylactic to cashews.
Yeah.
I mean, I get 1 or 2 a year, but I don't have all of these kids going to the allergist and having testing and EpiPens and all of that. Right. Usually they're coming from other offices.
So you definitely don't agree with introducing rice cereal at 4 months, like a lot of traditional pediatricians did or do. What do you feel like is the best introduction? How do you transition your kiddos from milk to solids?
So I really just go over 2 options for people. We need to wait till they're 6 months, right? The little junctions in their intestinal lining are starting to get tighter, things like that. Okay. When my kids are like 4 or 5 months and they're like, they can sit in their little infant seat pretty well and they're hanging out with people or eating dinner, I'll say I'll give them here's an entire carrot. Here's a giant carrot. Here's a giant celery. Here's a giant okra. And they're like, oh, and it's cold from the fridge and it has a smell and a taste, and they mouth it. Obviously, you're watching them to make sure they don't choke. Not likely if they don't have teeth, but if you're like Victoria and you got teeth at 4 months, which I found to be very rude, I had to watch her closely, right? But that's kind of what I do, and they really love it. They like to entertain themselves while everybody is eating dinner, and at 4 months they learn by mimicking. So they'll watch people eat and go, Grandma's like, oh my God, he's starving, feed him. No, just no, leave him alone. So 6 months, you really want to try to feed, it has to be pureed foods, okay? And I start with veggies and with bland stuff, avocados, green beans, zucchini squash, yellow squash, all of those things. Only a new food every 3 to 4 days, and watch for reactions and all of that kind of stuff. And so sometimes kids act like they really want the food and you go to feed them and they are looking at you like, what is wrong with you? That is the worst idea you've ever had. They're like, if they do that, just stop. They shouldn't need the calories, right? Food before 1 is just for fun, is the old adage. So you can do that with the purees, or you can do baby-led weaning, where you wait until they're sitting on their own. They've lost their tongue thrust reflex, which is where when you put something in their mouth, they go, that reflex, and they have some sort of pincher grasp to get something to their mouth. Okay. So the rule with solids is it's, finger size, it's bite sized, it's soft, and the only person who's allowed to put it in their mouth is them. If they can't figure out how to get it there, they probably don't know what to do with it when it gets there. And they'll play with it for a long time and squish it and not even bring it to their mouth, throw it in the floor, and then eventually they'll just start eating. But most kids will get food to their mouth well by 10 and a half months. I am very lazy. I'm picky about food. I'm not making pureed food. I do not have time for it. And I also don't want to sit there and do this with the spoon. I just don't want to. So you can eat when you can feed yourself, right? Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yep. So I do lots of veggies first. Julia was a later eater, so she got veggies, meats, and beans, and then fruits. Jason and Victoria, they love to eat. And so they did veggies, fruits, and then meats and beans and stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Don't work hard. Do you know how much easier it is to leave the house with your boobs and diapers?
That sounds so much easier than packing food or feeling guilty about prepackaged food and then guilty if you don't make it yourself.
Or when they do start eating and you want to have Mexican food or somebody wants pizza and you're like, you can't eat pizza, nor would I feed that to you. So now I'm like warming up veggies and meat in a container and sticking it in a diaper bag so I can feed you while everybody else is eating. Like I like to hold off on that as far as possible because it's extra work for me and I don't like that.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say in general, like think of all the families, all the newborns that you see, what do we get wrong as a society in the way we treat our newborns and toddlers?
Well, I'm trying to think how to say this. For one thing, we're too careful with them. In the way that we hold them and move them and the kind of activity they have, we're way too careful. Like they're too stagnant. And we have way too much stuff for them. And we work too hard, like baths. How do you have time to bathe your kids every day? I'm still trying to figure that one out. Like I'm cooking dinner and doing dishes and like, we're dealing with horses and chickens and like, what are we doing? So it's like, they have the special bathtub and the soaps and so now we're washing them. And so now we got to put moisturizer on them. Like just, we're working way too hard. And we have way too much stuff. Right. So put them in the floor. You have to have something. Like sometimes you're like, I just need to eat or I just need to pee or do a dish. So I'm going to put you in this swing. Like you can have a couple of things, but for the most part, you don't need every contraption. You don't need the Bluetooth this or the Bluetooth that. They don't need to be bathed every day. They're not rolling around in the dirt. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think a lot, like we're consumers. And so we buy the things and then we work too hard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
It's a lot of keep up with the Joneses
right
around what we give and buy our babies.
Yes. My computer's not plugged in. I just noticed. Okay. See, I had my breast pump plugged in. Forgot to plug my computer in before I started. So there you go. Okay. Speaking of breastfeeding. So I do feel like that's what I tell the new moms, when their skin gets all dry, and I go, I'm going to tell you a story. Julia's almost 9. She got a water bath only at 1 week. And then she got a water bath once a week. Jason, he's 6. He got a water bath at a month and then a water bath once a month. Smelled great skin. I spot check them. Like, people pet their hair and it gets greasy. Just take a wet washcloth and it poofs up and I clean the fuzz out of their fingers. And if they spit up, I clean the diaper, clean. I am not working that hard. Victoria, she got a water bath at 4 weeks. She's going to be 1. Gosh, in like less than 2 weeks. And I think she's been in the water 5 times. I know that I had John hand her to me in the shower 3 different times. and I just held her under the spray and like opened her hands and kind of got the water everywhere and like kind of did some cradle cap stuff. And then last month the kids were in the bathtub and she pulled up and she was super interested. So I set her in there on Julia's lap and she liked that. And then she sat there and played. She smells amazing. She has amazing, beautiful skin. Her hair is curly. It looks amazing all the time. She has never once had any moisturizer on her ever. I've never put a moisturizer, never, like literally ever. So that's, it's like we're buying too many products that are causing us to need products, and then we're working too hard. And that would be my biggest thing.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you joy?
What gives me joy? Sleep. Just kidding. Look, I'm about to turn 44 and have a baby, right? Okay, so sleep gives me joy. I mean, really the thing that I love the most, like in my work, is when a mom is like, I got a text earlier and she's like, I just wanted to update you, but his eczema is so much better. Like we did this and this and this and this, like you said, and there's no more open wounds and this is better and this is better. We're waiting for this to clear up. So is there anything else I can do? I'm like, okay, well, let's start this probiotic like very slowly. And she's like, okay. So I love reports on skin clearing up and babies being happy that were very grumpy before. Like that makes me so happy. Mm-hmm.
What makes you mad?
Feeding babies peanut butter at 4 months. I think what really makes me mad is that there are a lot of moms out there who want to do the best and they know they're having their intuition. Like something is not right, or like this is not okay. My baby should not cry this much. And they're being told it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And they're basically being gaslit into ignoring their maternal instincts. Like at the crux of it, that's what makes me pretty furious on a daily basis. Like I have these moms in here and I'm like, you knew.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You just needed to find someone who said, okay, you're saying there's something wrong. We're going to figure out what it is. That was what you were missing. But your intuition, you're not a horrible mom. You're a fantastic mom. Your intuition was spot on. And now you're getting good help, right? But how many people out there know that and they don't know there's other options that exist, or maybe they don't have the funds. They don't have the money to like even look or try or have the time to get off of work, and they're just stuck with this one doctor who doesn't care.
Yeah.
That makes me mad.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to be known for?
I really try very hard to be known as like the holistic baby and toddler expert. That's really what I'm going for. I even had a family from India that schedules with me on WhatsApp because they had a screaming baby, and that's the farthest away that I've helped is India. Isn't that crazy?
I love that.
I think they saw me on the Dr. Ardis show. So I tell people, I'm like, I do phone consults. And that was a screaming baby. And they're like, he is better. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yep. So
that's a good thing to be known for.
It is. So that's really what I want to be known for. And I want to be able to help people just outside of my own area. I always have this goal to have a website up where I can have so much information. I'm almost done writing a book that I'm probably going to end up just putting out in sections, like the feeding section and the development section and the breastfeeding and this, because everybody takes everything in such small doses now, But I really want to get all that done. I just need life to be a little less chaotic so I can finish it. I'm a little frustrated at this point, but I'm trying to get as much information out to people as possible. So,
I mean, you've been busy. You've got some pretty good excuses.
Yeah. Right. Like I was like, I know I have really good excuses, but like, I want to not have it. Like I actually want to do it,
You will. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, dear. That's all I have. Is there anything else that you want to tell our audience? Any last words of hope or encouragement?
Well, I kind of want to give a plug to like the good dentists, to be honest. Like,
Oh,
if you're watching this and you're like, oh, my baby has a problem, maybe, and I've been poo-pooed about the mouth or whatever, like, go to a dentist, but go to the right one. Please don't go to an ENT who's going to use scissors or a scalpel because your insurance pays for it, and then they graze the top and it does nothing. Don't go to the dentist on the corner just because they're a dentist. I had someone recently, I gave them a list. Okay, here are your three options. You were on the list. Stephanie, here are your three options. The mom's like, I'm going here in an hour. And I'm like, why? Well, this friend said that they really like this dentist. He's nice. And I'm like, no. Bad releases there. Like, I need you to cancel the appointment. She's like, oh gosh. I'm like, yeah, I mean, we have social media now. Like, you can figure it out. Like, if there's a problem, don't let somebody tell you that there's not a problem or try to convince you otherwise. And then just start asking around and find the best person. And I don't care if they are 45 minutes from you or an hour from you, drive there. Right? That's my biggest plug for the moms.
oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Our patients appreciate that. The audience appreciates that. And I don't have anybody in India yet, but we do have a lot of people who drive from out of state to come see us.
You guys had someone from another country though. Wasn't there someone? There was someone from Asia.
Oh, yeah. Yes, from Japan.
Yes, that's what I thought. There was someone that came from Japan. I did have a baby come in from Germany to see me, a screaming baby. Yeah. So I'm like, listen, moms. Like, oh, is there someone like within 20 minutes? I'm like, people are flying across the world. There are dads waking up at 2:30 a.m. their time to talk on the phone with me.
Get on the phone.
Like, you can drive 45 minutes to an hour. I promise. Like, go to the best person, get the best help, get yourself out of the chaos as fast as possible. You can enjoy your baby. Yeah.
And enjoy. There, yes. If I could go back, good heavens, there are so many things that I would do different. And the first, like many areas of my life, is I would just ask for better help sooner, faster, and more help.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I agree. Ask for help, guys.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
So much. You bet. I appreciate it. This was fun. And everybody out there, we will see you next time.